Hello and welcome to the Gracie Gatto podcast. I'm Gracie Gatto. Now, quick warning before we start tonight. If you happen to be eating popcorn right now, you might want to set aside the butter for this one. Trust me, in about 60 seconds, you'll either thank me or you'll never look at a concession stand the same way ever again. But tonight's story starts with popcorn and butter. And a man who put both of those things in writing into a sexual proposition to a coworker, and then spent the next 27 years as one of the most prolific, trusted, forensic scientists in the state of New Hampshire. His name is Kevin McMahon, and the state knew. Oh, the state knew. And for 43 years, almost nobody asked to see the whole file until this afternoon. So let me tell you who Kevin McMahon is, and then let me tell you what just landed in the state of New Hampshire's inbox. And the clock that started ticking the moment it did. Pull up a chair. This is going to be a good one. But let me introduce you to a man you've never heard of. And that's the first problem. His name is Kevin McMahon. For more than 4 decades, he was a criminalist at the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory in Concord. The people in the white coats, the ones who tell a jury whose DNA is on the evidence, the ones we're supposed to trust precisely because they're not supposed to be characters. They're supposed to be the neutral party, the hand, the sign. So let's talk about the neutral hand. In June of 2023, the director of the Division of the State Police, Colonel Nathan Noyes, N-O-Y-E-S, suspended Kevin McMahon without pay for 15 days. McMahon appealed. He lost unanimously. And the document that came out of that appeal, that Personnel Appeals Board decision, is a public record. And I happen to have it right in front of me, and I'm going to read you what the state of New Hampshire found about its own forensic scientist. It starts in February of 2023. A female coworker asks if anyone else in the room is going to stay late, or anyone wants to stay late to finish some work. McMahon's reply is, quote, "I bet you say that to all the guys," end quote. That's from the New Hampshire Personnel Appeals Board, docket number 2024-D-010. So that comment is what triggered the complaint filed by the lab's own director. But once they started pulling the thread, here's what the investigation surfaced. And I want you to notice the years. In 2021, he circulates a workplace email built on a Saturday Night Live sketch, the Sweaty Balls one. And I'm quoting the board's own description here. And, quote, "an obviously inappropriate double entendre with sexual connotations," end quote. In 2020, a coworker asked if the office has any festive wrapping paper. And McMahon answers by naming a male colleague and attaching a photo of a grown man dressed as a ballerina. When a supervisor confronts him about it, his response again, the board's words, quote, "he replied with a quip that he did not give a damn," end quote. Now that's from the same docket. Yeah. So in 2016, a female coworker writes him up for caressing her bare arm while she was mid-conversation with another woman. His reaction was not an apology. The board found he accused her of being rude and called her complaint uncalled for. And then we go all the way back to 1997, a former letter of warning for what he'd said to a female subordinate. Quote, "I'm going to read it exactly because nothing I could invent would land harder." So let me quote this thing for you. Quote, "Pop 2 boxes of popcorn and we can roll around naked in it in our back," end quote. Quote, "the butter is better for lubrication, but if you're concerned about your weight, we can use light popcorn," end quote. What a guy. That's 1997. Now, here's the line that should stop you cold. Between 2018 and the day they finally suspended him, the state of New Hampshire sent Kevin McMahon to sexual harassment training at least 5 times. 5. So the state knew. The state documented, the state trained him 5 separate times. And the board's own conclusion was that none of it changed a thing. They wrote that he continued a, quote, continuing lack of understanding or even concern, end quote, about his conduct affected the people around him, about how his conduct, I mean, he didn't care. So this is the man, not the monster from the movie. It's something quieter, a lot more sinister, and more useful to understand. And a man whose own employer, like, warned, rewarned, trained, retrained, and ultimately suspended a documented decades-long pattern certified by a unanimous state board. And hold that thought, hold it, because here's where the floor drops out. The same man with the same file sitting in a drawer in Concord was one of the state's prosecutors. He's the one that the state prosecutors kept walking up the witness stand. Trusted in the most serious cases this state has ever tried. We'll get there. And then stay with me. We're going to talk about the part of his file the public was never shown. So everything I've told you about Kevin McMahon, the state of New Hampshire filed under personnel, a conduct problem, and HR heading with a lab coat. Bad, but he's contained. The kind of thing that stays locked inside a state office building in Concord. Now, I'm going to tell you the part that reaches you. The part that reaches every person who ever sat in a New Hampshire courtroom and listened to a man in that lab coat say the word match. So let's rewind to June of 2014. In Nashua, a man named Harvey Martell is on trial for sexually assaulting his daughter more than a decade earlier when she was 14 years old. And the state's forensic witness, the man who tested the evidence, is, you guessed it, Kevin McMahon. The defense goes after the DNA. That's normal. That's the job. That's, the public defender, Steve Rosecan, tells the jury the lab's testing cannot be trusted. His words were, quote, forensic testing has limits. Science has limits, end quote. And that's from the public defender, Steve Rosecan's opening argument. As reported by the Nashua Telegraph of June of 2014, and then on cross-examination, something extraordinary happens. So McMahon, under oath, begins listing the times his own DNA ended up on the evidence he was testing. And notice where we are when it surfaces. This came out under cross-examination. Now, the defense had to drag it into the light. The prosecution never volunteered a word of it. Not once. Not a fluke. Pattern. It came up under cross-examination. The prosecutors never mentioned it. His DNA on a suspect's shirt in the 1980s, his DNA on a sweatshirt in 2004, on a rope in 2009, on a sleeping bag in 2011. It goes on and on. So the man whose entire job is to determine whose biological material is on the evidence kept finding his own. You follow me? So after the 2011 incident, he testified he was pulled off certain kinds of work. Now here's a clip from the Nashua Telegraph. And the lab changed its rules. Criminologists would now have to wear masks over their mouths and noses during certain tests. Now sit with what that means. They put masks on the analyst because the analyst's own DNA ended up on the evidence. And DNA doesn't only travel on a breath. It travels on saliva, skin cells, stray hair, on the briefest touch. So Swango said it herself on that Labrie stand. DNA transfers by contact. The people hunting for the trace were leaving their own, which could come from many number of transfer sources, including bodily fluids, nose drip, semen, ear discharge, pus, blood, blah, 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 blah. So he also acknowledged false positives on proficiency tests. The very exams meant to confirm an analyst can be trusted. So in 2011 and again in 2013, tests he admitted similar to the one he'd run on the evidence in that very case. Now, here's where I have to be straight with you, because this show runs on receipts, not vibes. So Harvey Martell was convicted. The jury heard every word of that DNA challenge, and they convicted Harvey Martell in spite of it. So this is not a story about a monster walking free because of a sloppy lab. I won't tell you that because it isn't true. Here is what is true. And it's worse in a quieter, sinister sort of way. So in June of 2014, Kevin McMahon stood in a courtroom and admitted under oath on the public record that his own DNA had a habit of turning up on the evidence he handled. That admission existed. It was said out loud. Now, a reporter wrote it down, for crying out loud. In that same summer of 2014, that same man was handed another girl's underwear to test. 15 years old, in a case that was about to become one of the most watched trials in history of the state. He would take the stand too. And this time, not one word about the masks. Not one word about the sleeping bag. Not one word about his own DNA or his own disciplinary record. The witness and defendant's names have been in national headlines for years. His history wasn't in that courtroom or the headlines for 1 second. We'll get there. Now, if you've been listening this whole time, waiting for the other shoe, waiting for me to tell you that Kevin McMahon's dirty hands finally wrecked a case, I have to disappoint you. And I'm going to on purpose. Because the day this show starts telling you what you want to hear is the day you should tune out. And go read the New Hampshire Journal. 2 days before he graduated from St. Paul's School in May of 2014, an 18-year-old named Owen LeBrie was with a 15-year-old freshman in a secluded room on campus. What happened in that room became the subject of one of the most watched trials in the history of this state. And the underwear in that case? The evidence passed through the hands of Kevin McMahon. In the summer of 2014, he did the serology and he made the cuttings. So here's where you have to brace yourself for the contamination. Because McMahon didn't do the DNA. A second criminalist did, Katie Swango. And under oath, she testified how she split that sample in two. The sperm fraction. So fraction 2 came back with DNA from 3 or more people to complex 2 read, no conclusion. And it could not be attributed to the defendant. That part's real, and we'll come back to that, why that matters. But the other fraction, fraction 1, the part with no sperm, the cells left by touch or saliva or transfer, Swango testified that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, excluding the odds of an identical twin, the male DNA belonged to Owen LeBrie. The number she put on it, better than 1 in 390 billion. That's not McMahon's compromise report. That's a clean analyst doing clean work, landing on a match so strong it's effectively a fingerprint. Pun intended. The jury went on to acquit LeBrie of the felony rape charges. They weren't convinced there was no sex, but they also disagreed with the state's argument that there was no consent. They convicted him of misdemeanor sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl. However, Swango was careful about 3 things. 1, she couldn't say how the mixed DNA got onto the sperm. Fraction 2, She could not name Owen Labrie as a contributor to that fraction because it was too complex. And 3, that underwear didn't reach her first. It went from the family to Concord Police, then to Kevin McMahon for serology, and only then from McMahon to Swango for DNA. The man with the documented habit of leaving his own DNA on evidence handled it before the DNA analyst ever opened the bag. Now, I'm going to tell you something that should unsettle you even more. The lab system caught it this time. There was a second analyst. There was a clean fraction. There was a backstop. But here's what should still keep you up at night. The jury met Kevin McMahon as a 32-year veteran of the state lab and never heard one word about his own contamination history. Not the sleeping bag, not the masks, not the proficiency tests he failed. The man who handled that evidence had a file, and the people whose lives turned on his word were never shown it. The prosecutors never mentioned it. In fact, they successfully argued to the judge that Kevin McMahon's report should be entered into the record with only the first 2 pages of Katie Swango's. So you cannot cross-examine what you don't know exists. A jury verdict is only as good as the evidence the jury is given. So the question that should keep this whole state up at night is the one we still can't answer. How many times did the state fail to tell a defendant who Kevin McMahon really was? And to find out, you need the whole file. So it's funny because somebody asked for exactly that.
Sure. How long did you work for them?
For over 40 years.
And it's my understanding that you retired last year from there.
Yes, I did.
What was your position while you were working at the lab?
I was assigned to the forensic biology unit.
And was there an official title that you had?
Criminalist 2.
Okay. And what does that mean to be a Criminalist 2 at the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Lab?
Well, a Criminalist 1 is an entry-level position. Criminalist 2 would be more of a journeyman-level position where you have more responsibilities or more duties assigned to you than a Criminalist 1 would.
I understand that you said that you were there for 40 years. What were the different units of the lab that you worked in during those 40 years?
I worked primarily in the forensic biology unit, although way back when it was just forensic serology. I was actually hired as a drug chemist, but then was transferred into the serology section. But over the years, I took on additional responsibilities, most of those dealing with the analysis of items of what are known as trace evidence, which would include the examination of hairs and fibers, the examination of paints and plastics, and the examination of automobile lamps.
And Mr. McMahon, let me ask you, can you go through a little bit of what your educational background was, specifically in the area of dealing with serology and the identification of bodily fluids?
Well, I hold both Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in forensic science from the University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut. And both those programs were overseen by fairly well-known forensic biochemists at the time. And so it would be difficult for someone to go through that program without having a lot of experience and exposure to forensic serology. And so in addition to what I learned about forensic serology while undergoing my education, I underwent extensive on-the-job training soon after transferring to the serology section of the lab back in 1983.
And could you please explain what forensic serology is? What is that the science of?
So forensic serology is that area of expertise within the field of the forensic sciences that deals specifically with the identification and the characterization of blood and other body fluids as they are associated with physical evidence. And it's the screening process which in modern times immediately precedes DNA testing.
And over your career, how many serological analysis or serology analysis would you estimate that you've made?
Serological analyses, I would estimate in the thousands or tens of thousands.
Have you ever been qualified in court as an expert witness in the subject of serology?
I have many times.
And were those in New Hampshire courts?
Yes.
Okay. And does that include this particular jurisdiction where we are today, Hillsborough County, Northern District?
It does.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I'd ask the court to please qualify Mr. McMahon as an expert in the field of forensic serology.
Any objection?
I have no objection to him giving his opinion.
The court finds that he is qualified as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, I saved the hardest one for last, and I want to handle this with care because at the center of it is a little girl. Her name is Harmony Montgomery. She was 5 years old, and in February of 2024 in a courtroom in Manchester, her father stood trial for beating her to death and then concealing her body for years. He was convicted on every count. Now, there is no doubt to manufacture here, and I won't try, but I want to tell you who the state of New Hampshire called to that witness stand, because by now, you already know his name, Kevin McMahon. Suspended and retired by then, but the state brought him back and they put him on the stand as their serologist, the man who's tests for blood. So here's a clip of the WMUR.
Mr. McMahon, if you would please remain standing for a moment and please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give this jury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please feel free to have a seat. Up until last year, where did you work?
I was formerly employed by the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory in Concord, New Hampshire.
Mr. McMahon, what was your involvement into the investigation into the death of Harmony Montgomery?
I was assigned as the point person, at least as far as any requests that were made by the Manchester Police Department for testing or examination of evidence for biological materials, primarily in this case blood or hairs.
I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the evidence that you did do serology testing or at least examinations on in this case. It's my understanding that several of the items that you examined had no stain, that you saw nothing to be tested. Is that correct?
That's correct. There were a number of items that I examined and did not find any stains or deposits that I felt were characteristic of blood. And so no further testing was done beyond a mere physical examination.
And then were there other items that you looked at that you did test, but it turned out that they were negative for blood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were there also an item or two that you tested that was positive for blood?
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to start then, understanding that those are three categories of things that you found. I want to start with some of the evidence that you tested that did not have blood on them, things that were examined and tested, but then did not have blood. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What pieces of evidence did you test that you found out that they did not have blood on them? And I'd like to start specifically with items that you tested on January 5th of 2022, that you wrote in a report on January 5th of 2022. And would you like me to refer to and let me ask you, did you sit through a deposition, Mr. McMahon, on the same case?
I did.
And the same file that you have with you today, is that the one that you had at deposition when you were able to answer Attorney Smith's questions on that day?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And first of all, what was the description that you had for that item?
It was a section of automobile carpeting, not from the passenger compartment, but from the trunk of an automobile.
And let me ask, we're talking about JMT8. Did you ever meet a detective by the name of Joseph Tucker from the Manchester Police Department?
I did not.
Okay. The testing on JMT8, what were the serological tests that you performed on that, and what was the results?
Well, I performed a physical examination of this piece of carpeting by putting some white paper, some bench paper, down on my examination bench, and then taking this section of carpeting out of its original container, laying it out on the bench, and examining it under the normal room lights. And maybe with the assistance of a flashlight, I did not see any staining on there that I thought was suggestive of blood.
The evidence he was asked about, the ceiling materials, the vent, the place a 5-year-old's body had been hidden. He told the jury that these materials he tested came back positive for blood. Now, hold that picture. The man in the chair is the same man who 10 years earlier admitted under oath that his own DNA kept turning up on the evidence he handled. The man whose lab made analysts wear masks because they were breathing onto the samples. And at that very moment, February 2024, he had a disciplinary appeal pending. The state knew it. And across the aisle, the defense was raising questions about whether the evidence in this case had been mishandled. That's a great deal of smoke around one man in one chair. But here's the part that tells you the most. Watch what the state did with the evidence that actually mattered. The DNA on a toothbrush from the car went to a different analyst, Katie Swango. And the big one, the DNA on the blood-stained ceiling, the piece that tied the scene to the crime, the state of New Hampshire didn't run in its own lab at all. They sent it to a private lab in Florida. So in the most watched case of his career, in front of the whole country, Kevin McMahon was trusted to tell a jury, yes, that's blood. And the question of whose blood, the question that actually decides things, was quietly handed to somebody else again. Just like the Owen Labrie case. So you can see the shape of it now. This was never a story about a man who corrupted his cases. It's a stranger and quieter, and in some ways a lot worse. It's the story of an institution that kept walking one man up to the witness stand for 43 years, while on the questions that counted most, it kept routing around him. So ask yourself why. Why was the man they called to the stand, the man they trusted least, with the decisive work? That is not how you treat an expert you believe in. That's how you treat a problem you can't quite figure out how to solve yet. So weeks after he testified about the blood on a murdered child's ceiling, the state of New Hampshire finally ran out of patience with Kevin McMahon and upheld his suspension. Not for any of the DNA, for the melted butter popcorn sexual fantasy, and the ballerina and everything after. The contamination, the thing that should make you question every match he ever called, still isn't a public document you've been allowed to read. This isn't just going on in New Hampshire. And if you're sitting there thinking New Hampshire must be uniquely broken, I have worse news for you. It isn't. It's normal. Last week in Colorado, a forensic scientist named Missy Woods pleaded guilty to 4 felonies. For nearly 30 years, she analyzed DNA for the state in an investigation found she cut corners, deleted data, and manipulated results in more than 1,000 criminal cases. Her own colleagues flagged her work in 2014 and again in 2018. The Bureau didn't stop her until an intern stumbled onto missing data in 2023. Years of warnings ignored. So in Massachusetts, a lab chemist named Annie Ducan fake drug results to pad her numbers. And when it unraveled, the state had to throw out more than 20,000 convictions. 20,000. One analyst. Here's another example. In New York, 3 lab scientists say they were fired for trying to correct DNA errors that happened to favor the prosecution. Now, I want to be precise because precision is the whole job here. Now, Woods and Duquesne committed fraud. They were convicted of it. Now, I'm not telling you Kevin McMahon did what they did. There is no evidence he faked a result, and I won't pretend there is. The thread that ties all of this together isn't the analysts, it's the institutions. So every single time a lab saw the red flags and kept the analyst on the bench anyway, while the warnings piled up and the cases piled up under them. New Hampshire knew since 1997, or possibly earlier, that it had a problem with the state's criminologist, Kevin McMahon. But he kept on being brought into the trial after trial as an expert witness. So that's the record. 4 decades of it. A man the state warned, trained, suspended, and walked up to the witness stand anyway. Now, here's what I haven't told you yet. The reason we're running this tonight and not next month. Because last Friday, the 26th of June at 1:45 in the afternoon, a public records request went out under New Hampshire's Right to Know law, RSA 91A. It was sent to the state police forensic lab. It went to police standards and training. It went to the Department of Justice, and it was copied to half the newsrooms in New Hampshire. And in the interest of telling you the truth about how this sausage gets made to the show, the ask is very simple. Every disciplinary record, every notice, every letter of warning, from the day Kevin McMahon was hired 43 years ago to today. Not the summary, the file. And here's the gap the request is pointing at. The Personnel Appeals Board decision. The one I've been reading you all night. It mentions the 1997 letter. It mentions the 2023 suspension. But there's one it doesn't mention at all. In 2011, not for a joke, at this time. After his own DNA turned up on evidence he'd handled, McMahon testified he was pulled from certain work at the lab. We know that happened because Kevin McMahon said so, himself under oath, in open court in 2014. So the official record the public is allowed to see, the Personnel Appeals Board ruling, and the things that the man admitted to under oath don't quite line up. One of them is missing a chapter. Now, I want to be careful, and I want you to be careful with me. Now, a gap is not a cover-up. Not yet. Maybe there's a clean reason. The harassment file and the contamination file live in two very different drawers. Maybe. And that right there is exactly what a right to know request is for. Not to assume the answer. We'll leave that to the New Hampshire Journal. To make the state show its work. So under the law, the state has 5 days to respond. 5 days to hand over the file or to refuse in writing and tell us why, or to look us in the eye on paper and tell us exactly when. So the clock started ticking last Friday, and I want you to notice how totally unglamorous all of this is. This is what accountability actually looks like. It's not a viral post, it's not a mob, it's a citizen, a statute, a deadline, and the paper trail. It's someone saying to the most powerful institutions in this state, show me the whole file. And then waiting on the record to see what they do. So we'll be watching. we'll be watching the inbox, and next week on this show, I'll tell you exactly what the state of New Hampshire chose to send back. Or chose not to, because, here's the thing about it. A man who spent a career deciding whose DNA was on the evidence. Eventually, somebody asked to test his. So one last thing before we go. While we wait on that file, we're already chasing the next thread about what a man like this does after the lab coat comes off and the kind of quiet public trust he should never be handed. I'm not going to tell you what we found. Well, not yet. Not until I can prove it the way I've proved everything else tonight. But if that's what it looks like, that's next week. Receipts first, always. This has been the Gracie Gatto Podcast.